Before we start, I wanted to show you a picture for as we start. That's a bridge in Honduras, in a place called Choluteca. I don't know if you've heard about it, and it's a very fine bridge, or it was a very fine bridge, until in, I think it was 1998, Hurricane Mitch devastated all of that area of South America. And now it's a bridge which looks rather forlorn, really. It doesn't lead anywhere, and the river has moved as a result of that hurricane, and so the bridge no longer goes over the river. And I'll come back to that bridge later on. Last week we began a series of sermons where we are looking at the values that we want to aspire to as a church family, values that we hope will create a culture within our church which will help us grow in faith and mission. And last week we were thinking about wanting to be a church of people who are passionate for God. And this week we're thinking about wanting to be a church that is outward looking. And to help us think about that, we're going to spend some time thinking about Jesus's commissioning of his followers to be salt and light. You are the salt of the earth, he says. You are the light of the world. Now, when we're looking at passages in the Bible, the context is always really important. And here I think it's very significant. Jesus, at this point in Matthew's Gospel, has just begun to teach his disciples through a couple of chapters or so that we now refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. And this bit about being salt and light follows straight on from Jesus's opening statements, a series of very surprising blessings. And we know them perhaps as the Beatitudes. And there's a kind of progression maybe through these blessings and beatitudes. Firstly, Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. In other words, we're blessed when we understand our own spiritual poverty, our spiritual need. And then he says, blessed are those who mourn. And that's not just about bereavement. Following on from that first blessing, this is just as much about us being blessed when, having understood how spiritually bankrupt we really are, we're heartbroken for what that has meant for our world and for our own lives. And then Jesus says, blessed are the meek. That is, when we come in humility to God and we lay our lives before him, we're blessed. Now, those might not sound very much like blessings, but in God's economy, in God's kingdom that we're talking about here, they really are blessings. When we recognize and mourn our spiritual poverty, then being willing to submit our lives to God, those are precisely the keys to God's kingdom and his blessing. And then we become those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who want to see God's justice for others and for creation. Because we have been shown comfort and mercy by God, we become those who are merciful towards others. Because we know that despite everything, God is 100% for us. Then we become those who are purely, totally 100% for him. Because we have known what it is to be reconciled with God and to have peace made between us and him, we become peacemakers. And when we do all of that, we will undoubtedly be those who get ridiculed and scorned or derided, or maybe worse, by others. But in all of those things too, we're blessed, says Jesus. You will see things made right. We will receive and be shown mercy upon mercy. We will see God and be known as his children. Great thing to remember on Father's Day, that we have that Heavenly Father and we are his precious children. Ours will be the kingdom of heaven, says Jesus, as we start to live those things out. And all those things, through all those blessings, we're changed. We have to be, don't we? to have gone from admitting that we are spiritually bankrupt, that we have no means by which to win God's favour or to save ourselves, to have gone from that to being God's sons and daughters, that's going to have an impact on us, surely. Blessed people are different. Blessed people make a difference. Blessed people are the difference. Blessed people are salt and light. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And there's a sense here in which we don't really get to choose whether or not we fancy being salt or light. It's not really up to us. It's not an optional extra for Christians. When we become followers of Jesus, something about us fundamentally changes. We become part of God's family and become part of what he wants to do in our world. So what does it mean to be salt and light? Jesus doesn't really explain it, does he? So I guess he sort of thought the meaning was fairly obvious. By salt, Jesus perhaps seems to be saying that his followers will be a benefit to the world and the people around them, that they will protect against decay, that they'll help their communities flourish and thrive, that they'll bring out the best in life and enhance life for those around them. And being light, again, that's about bringing life. It's also perhaps about exposing those things that need to be dealt with, being those who bring comfort and hope, and those who are light for others, who light the way for others. And the one we are lighting the way to is Jesus. When we think of that change that comes from being those who were spiritually impoverished and far from God, to being those who can know that they are God's precious and loved children, the one who makes that change possible is Jesus. What does all this have to do with us being a church wanting to be outward looking? I'm glad you asked. Jesus's words come with a note of caution, don't they? Salt can lose its saltiness and a light can be hidden under a bowl. These are circumstances there are circumstances when we might not be fulfilling our God-given calling to protect and enhance and bring hope and comfort. We might find ourselves not being able to show people the way to Jesus. We might not be the difference that we're called to be. And there might be a number of reasons why that might happen, but I'm going to suggest that one really important factor in being able to do our job of being salt and light is to be outward looking. And when we're not outward looking, I think then we run into the danger of being ineffective salt and light. Now, I'm not saying St. Mary's isn't outward looking. I'm not saying that. I'm just encouraging us to sort of keep on being alert. Each of us, if we're seeking to be living sacrifices, which is what we were thinking of last week, if we are passionate for God to be at work in our lives day by day, then we will each be salt and light wherever we are, whatever we're doing, whoever we're with. And so we need to each be outward looking, having our eyes and ears and hearts open to what's going on in the lives of those around us, so that we can be the difference for them, which introduces them to the God who wants to bless them. But as individuals, and certainly as a church, we may find our salt and light isn't hitting the right spot unless we're aware of what's going on in our world and in our own community. If salt protects and heals, who are the people and what are the things that need protecting, and what are the situations that need healing at the moment? If light brings things into the open and brings life and hope and comfort, then what needs exposing and dealing with, and who needs to know that there's hope? You know, we know we have so many vulnerable people in our town, and that we're already working with our partner churches through things like Food Bank and CAP to help them. Are there other things that need to be on our radar? Perhaps those who are becoming vulnerable to being coerced into working for drug gangs, thinking of those county lines things that are going on at the moment. who might be victims of modern slavery. And what are the things that need protecting in our society? Perhaps things like marriage and family life, the concept of a Sabbath. And what are the things that need highlighting? Perhaps issues to do with racial injustice or sexual exploitation or climate change. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, oh no, the vicar's asking us to do even more. Well, I don't know what God may be asking you to do personally. I think all I'm asking us, at least as a church, to do is that we're aware, that we are informed, that we inform ourselves, that we figure out what God might have to say about all those issues, what he thinks about them through his word. I think it was John Stott, wasn't it, who said Christians should sort of have a newspaper in one hand and the Bible in the other, and always be looking to sort of see what the Bible has to say about the things that are going on in our world today. So, we need our prayers and our worship then to reflect those concerns and use our voice to speak into those situations when we have the chance, whether that's in conversation, writing to our councillors and MPs, and yes, maybe feeling that we are called to act. And yes, there might be those, who call us do-gooders or get told the church shouldn't get too political. I don't think those are party political issues. They are people issues. And if the church doesn't have anything to say about them, then we don't have anything to say at all. Our outward looking does need, though, to be prayerful and God-directed. When we find, we might then find that our salt and light isn't needed any longer in one particular area, or we might need to sort of tweak what we're doing, or that it's needed more urgently in another area. So to mix the metaphors a bit, we might find the river has moved and our bridge isn't in the right place anymore. Unless we're outward looking, we could end up concentrating our salt and light in one area that's when it needs to change and the need has changed, or indiscriminately spreading it too thinly. Being outward looking may mean being willing to change how we do things and how we prioritise things so that our salt and light is accessible and relatable to by a society and culture that might have a very different way of thinking and seeing the world than we do. Of course, we still have to stay salty. We still have to stay true to who Jesus is and what he's done for us, so that our good news doesn't become so diluted that it loses its impact. But how are we going to be the light that guides them to Jesus unless we're holding that light in such a way that it actually leads them from where their feet are now? Our good news needs to start with from the concerns and questions that people have about life today. So, where is the river now? And perhaps has it moved in recent months? Being outward looking is one way that we keep our saltiness effective. Being outward looking is one way that we put our light on a stand rather than hiding it under a bowl. Might be comfortable under the bowl, just sharing the light amongst ourselves, just sharing the light within the confines of what we're comfortable with, limiting the light to what we feel we can cope with. And I know I do that. And it's lovely under the bowl. But the trouble is that lamps, and certainly the kind of lamps that Jesus was thinking of, they don't do terribly well under bowls. Once all the oxygen is used up, they tend to just go out. Lifting the bowl can be scary and uncertain, because who knows where God might want us to shine. But that is what we've been called to do. Amen.